basically. Let's have the Prime Minister. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, so we as citizens, we actually put really much trust on these politicians. When we vote for them, we actually trust the politicians to actually do something for our greater good, right? So the problem of today's debate, right? Politicians tend to detach themselves from citizens, so their changes will not affect them, but affect the whole citizens. Like the citizens that will get affected by the way that they actually plan to change, to actually exit or from a coalition and with another party, right? So our solution of today's debate, right? We won't let them exit or from a coalition until the next election. So if they want to really exit that party, right, they can do it during next election. So before they announce their participation in this politics, right, they can just, oh, I already changed, I already switched my party, so that the citizens will get notice for it. Our stakeholders of today's debate is the politicians themselves, because they are the ones who will not allowed to change. And the second one is the citizens, because they are the ones who get affected by their policies, by their manifestos and stuff like that. So our trade-off of today's debate is the choice of the politicians, because we think like the politicians won't get affected, won't get harmed as much as the citizens will. So our burden of proof of today is how citizens will get affected the most if we don't like enact these anti-party hopping laws, and how the country's economy and citizens will get benefit from our world. So my first argument, citizens will feel betrayed. You know, like how we actually vote for a party because we really trust, really put like really believe that they will do that greater good for you, especially among the minority. So they voted for the party and the member, not only the member. So by giving them the chance to actually exit the party that they already get elected, right, it's actually like trying to say that the party is not important. But the thing is, most of them actually voted because of the party. And you know, like how our last GE, like most of the older people don't vote for Pakatan Harapan because they put like really much trust on UMNO, because UMNO was among the first political parties, right? Because they really put trust on that party. So that is why they don't vote for people from other parties. And let's talk about democracy, right? So democracy is basically about how we as citizens get to choose who will become our leader. So in our current status quo, we have to vote for the party, right? So like I said just now, we vote for the party and the member, not only for the member. So it's very important for us to acknowledge that party is actually very important in today's debate. And I think like the politicians, right, they owe the obligation to people who give them the position, because they win because these people vote for them and the party. So I think that it's only right for them to actually stay in the party, because that's what the obligation, right, they have to these people. Oh, thank you. And then I'm gonna explain more on the anti-party hopping laws. In the solution just now, so we won't let them exit. So how it looks like. So if you wanna exit, so maybe you'd be like, oh, okay, so during this term, I'm gonna be in Pakatan Harapan, but I'm gonna do whatever the manifesto that I have said to you before the GE. But after this, I'm gonna move to another party. That's how it's gonna work. No, thank you. So okay. So why do I say like citizens is very important here as the stakeholders? Because just imagine we are citizens. You come from a minority area. You come from a rural area, and then like suddenly like, for example, Barisan Nasional suddenly say, if you vote for me, if you vote for the Barisan Nasional, I'll make sure I will develop the rural area into become a better area. So that is why, and people actually these people actually believe, these minority people actually believe that they will do it. That's why they actually voted for them. So just imagine what will happen to the manifesto if they switch to another party, right? And I think it's very important that the citizens do not consent to this. Like, it's a democracy world, so we need like the citizens to vote, right? So thank you. And yeah, and then it's particular politicians and how suddenly they don't want suddenly they don't want to be that politician after they get elected, right? So it's very, very unfair. And I think it's and okay, moving on to my second argument, I think like the economy will get affected somehow. You know that our current news, like Mahathir suddenly tried to do something like that, right? It's just like normal thing, but the country is already in chaos. Like how our currency dropped immediately and we lost so much money. How do you think the investors will put my trust on the country that the politicians don't take their party seriously? Like, oh, I can switch party anytime I want. No, thank you. So I can switch party anytime I want. Why? How do you think like the investors will actually want to invest on this kind of countries? And with that, I raise my case.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Let's have the next speaker, Leader of Opposition. Here.
The world that Thai government chooses to live in is one that is ridden with this sort of very utopical idea, very idealistic idea, that if you force a person, an elected representative into power, even if their belief systems change, they at the end of the day will still make policies that cater to the very same belief systems that the people thought that they would be fighting for. I see this very prevalent inconsistency within the government case, and also how the numerous sort of characterizations that they so conveniently chose to miss out. Before I move on to my 2 points of substantive, a few characterizations that the Prime Minister clearly failed to provide to you. Firstly, what exactly do nascent and unstable democracies look like? I think that number one, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the political scope. Recognize that because this is a very fairly new democracy, they don't have background experience prior to this democracy forming. This means that they have no idea what sort of way to push the country in the future. They have no idea how a democracy really necessarily works, right? In some instances, maybe, they might have just transitioned from an absolute monarchy or even an autocratic regime, for instance. I think there's a very big gray area to what exactly policies should they push, and there are no sort of definite lines. I think a recently established democracy, which is very new to the political spectrum, is very susceptible to change. And the point at which you restrict this change is when you create so much distrust for the government, where you completely screw over the very same democratic system that you guys are so proud to be fighting for. I think that secondly, the second characterization is because nascent and unstable democracies are quite new, they're relatively unaware of how to change their political direction, meaning that by nature, they're very susceptible to changes simply because they haven't fixed something in stone to what they exactly want to push for. And that's bound to be changed because of how the atmosphere and impression were. I think this is a characterization that was clearly and conveniently missed out by the Prime Minister before me. What exactly is the problem, right? We see that people vote for individuals to represent them in parliament and the political atmosphere because they believe that these individuals will continue to carry the same ideas. I think it's really convenient for you to choose to believe in this, but recognizing that because of the nature that this is an unstable democracy, elected representatives are bound to change their political belief system. And the point at which you change your political belief system, there's a higher tendency to formulate policies that don't cater to the belief of the majority. Recognize that politicians aren't stupid. It doesn't mean that their belief systems change, that they'll necessarily create the same policies that the public wants. Rather, they'll create policies that they themselves want to create, meaning that they'll be like, screw what the public thinks, because I'm in power, I will do anything I can to stay in power. I think this is where you create tension inside of government and exacerbate it when you don't give people the ability to when you don't give politicians to be able to opt out. What exactly does our policy look like? They come up to you and say that, oh, we're going to allow like these backdoor governments, these shady sort of things. Firstly, we're going to enact laws that disallow the formation of backdoor governments, right? We have, rather what we propose is that we have a democratic vote to choose the same elected representatives that you previously elected in the last election. I think secondly, that imagine as a politician, you getting into power, but then you wanting to choose to dispose of that power and throw it away. I think that the instances that force you to do this, number one, you feel that you're in a really dire circumstance to the extent where you feel that you're incompetent, you're unable to be a good prime minister, for instance, and I don't see how you're able to formulate good policies and push the country in a good direction in the future when you yourself doubt your own competency. But not only that, when you change your political ideologies, I think it's much better for them to have the option to step down rather than continue stay in power. Because recognize that if people don't get what they want, they're obviously going to voice out their opinions. When peacefully voicing out their opinions doesn't work, they choose to opt into like much more violent sort of measures, right? I think that all it takes for an unstable democracy to crumble is for a bandwagon of hate to engulf. This bandwagon of hate exists on the side of government when you don't allow the people or you don't allow the politicians to opt out of these sort of things. My first point is substantive, how the elected representatives who have changed their belief systems will not make the best policies that side government is so proud to be posed for. I think recognize that number one, people vote representatives in power so that they have a proper avenue, a guaranteed avenue for them to represent their political views, right? They want them in power so that they know that their political opinion will have a say in parliament, for instance. But at the point at which that very same elected representative changes his or her belief systems, no longer represents the beliefs that you believe in, I don't see how then that same individual is going to create policies that pander to your own belief systems, right? Rather, when you provide an avenue for elected representatives to opt out, right, you give them an ability to create policies that are principally consistent with what they want. This means that they're able to create policies that now pander to what, like, they themselves want. When you lock them, when you barricade them into these positions of power and don't give them any sort of alternative to opt out. Recognize that democracy is imperfect. We aren't able to create on today's debate a world that's very idealistic and perfect. Rather, in the side of government, comparatively, recognize that the democratic system will progressively degrade. Why is this so? Because when the same politicians who you thought would represent the same beliefs you believe in, when they no longer, when they fail to do that, right, I think you lose trust in the fact that the democratic system is one that is good, because you no longer have this avenue for you to express your political opinions. I think that this creates distrust in the government, the same sort of distrust that side government is trying to push onto side opposition. I think this is much more exacerbated on their side, because you are now disempowering individuals for them to have their political say, right? I think it incentivizes people to no longer vote in the next election, because their thought process would be like, if I'm not going to have a representative to represent my political views, why should I even bother trying to be involved in the democratic system when the previous system was much better than this crappy system, right? I think you're most likely having to revert back to the sort of autocratic regimes that oppress you in the first place, because it's much better than a failing democratic system that doesn't give you what it's supposedly proposed to give you. You don't have to be inherently bad in order to be like a bad elected representative. Rather, you can just create policies that cater to your own belief systems. This means that the very same people that side government is trying to say that the elected representatives will create policies that pander to them. I don't understand how this manifests when these individuals have changed their belief system and have an incentive to do what they want rather than what the public want, because they're in personal power. But secondly, I think it's simply disgusting how you force people in these sort of echo chambers and you lock them up into things that they never consistent to. The reason why people opt into politics is because they believe that they have a chance to opt out. But at the point in which you barricade these people, lock them away in their own echo chambers, you don't give them the sort of ability for them to opt out. I think that, for instance, when the party in like extreme circumstances, for instance, like predates on the vulnerability of naive people, like for instance being like embezzled in corruption, laundering money, and these elected representatives might not necessarily want to associate with these kind of things. I think at the point in which you force these people to stay in the party is when you make them complicit to the very like detrimental things that their party does. I think that is the point in which you make this elected representative accountable for things that they weren't even culpable for. I don't see how this is fair, and I think this is something that side government needs to defend. But what exactly have I proven to you in my speech today? Is the fact that number one, anti-party hopping laws are necessarily and objectively the best thing for an especially nascent and unstable democracy. Because when your political atmosphere is susceptible to so much change, I think you should embrace that change rather to create measures that barricade it and lock it away from ever seeing the day of light. Never been proud to oppose. Thank you.
Alright, thank you, Leader of Opposition. Let's have the next speaker, DPM. Here.
I think what side opposition fails to do is they fail to provide a clear view on how exactly these unstable democracies, right, are able to like have become more stable through like people like party hopping, right? Because I think the main thing they're trying to say is if people are stuck in a certain system where they cannot escape, I don't think that they say there's something they cannot opt out of, and that's where when people cannot create the changes actually needed by like what's current in the current context, right? I think the problem when they don't exactly explain how this is clear, I think this is when it shows that side opposition does not exactly have a clear like path on how exactly their side is actually going to make these unstable democracies more favorable towards everyone involved. So let me look at what it said. So first we're talking about how like politicians don't have the ability to opt out, which is something they didn't consent to when they first joined, right? But I think like if this is implemented like throughout, I think this is something that politicians will in the future have to be able to consent to when they get into politics in the first place. So I don't think this is something that's foreign. Sure.
Why does it matter this is an individual that opts out the political system when the very party that represents you will still stay in power?
I think it's because when you switch parties, right? I think like the ideals that you have are still held upon the people, because you have to recognize that certain people when they vote for these politicians, it comes with a mixture of both like the party's ideals and then like what this person actually brings to the party, right? So it may not I think when you vote for a politician, it also automatically equate to you voting for the politicians' ideals for the party itself. I think it's a mixture of both. I'll explain why that's important. But I think when politicians recognize that like they don't have the ability to opt out, I think that like is when this is like implemented like world, right? I think these politicians like I don't think it's a problem anymore, because this is something they consent to when they join like the world of politics in the first place. But first of all, I'll talk about why like these unstable democracies are actually going to a state of like unstableness where it's even worsened by the fact that there's a shifting of like different parties involved, right? Because I think when this happens, what it looks like is that you leave positions vacant when no one can actually take up these like positions, right? Even like let's just say there's no replacements involved, right? Where there's like a neglect of duty in able to fulfill certain things that the government needs to continue. And I think that this is the problem, because then like certain things are not achieved in which they're supposed to. But let's say even if there is a replacement, right? I think the transition of power takes too long in order for it to be effective in the first place, which is I think something that side opposition has to address later onto how they plan to make the transition effective, because that's something that they're rooting for, right? I think when you lack people in the cabinet and things like that, I think that's when you achieve the inconsistency of how things are going to run, because you have people constantly shifting from one ideal to another. And I think when this happens on a very large scale, I think that you're it's extremely difficult to implement certain things, because there's no consistency involved in the process of electing someone, right? But then what things have happened in the past? I think in the past, when there's a lot of party hopping things, I think it happens at the point in which people think like these politicians realize that they have to switch parties in order to appeal to certain people. I think that when people vote for these politicians, I think in mind what they have is that these politicians will carry out this, they have to fulfill these duties, right? And since they are voted in by the citizen itself, I think that they have the responsibility to fulfill that, right? And when they don't get, and then one of the things they mentioned is that when people don't get they want, like they publicly voice their opinions, whether that comes from the form of peaceful voicing out or they come in the form of violent, right? I think that I think it happens worse on their side, because then you have people talking about how these politicians didn't stick to what like they're supposed to fulfill, like they neglected no thank you, but they neglected something that they were supposed to occur, right? Because I think some people when they vote, they prefer a change that comes from one party over another. I think that's important to recognize, because that's like I think people are like generally like when they vote for a party, I think what happens is that like okay, sure.
How on earth do you guarantee political stability when you lock up individuals in their detrimental echo chambers and force them to stay in there until the end of their term?
I think that I think that it happens worse actually when people are constantly shifting. But I feel like how it like succeeds better on our side is the stability of people involved, right? I think when you constantly shift like positions from this party to another party, I think what happens in there is that people like positions become like unfulfilled. You have things not happening. I think it's much more harder to enact new policies at a point when like everyone is there's no exactly clear path as to who exactly is here. Because when you have an unstable like democracy, I think there's people are constantly like fighting over like because they're unsure of what exactly is the best move forward. I think that this unsureness is gonna be even worse because when you constantly shift from here to here, I think the harm that happens is that people are not exactly sure of what they need to achieve. I think that is when you keep them in one party, I think like they are forced to actually create something that happens more like quickly, and this rapid transition needs to happen because if not, this unstable democracy is not going to have the current context is not going to get any better, especially when you delay it. And I think I use the word delay because I think that the transition of power takes a long time anyway. I think it's even worse when people are constantly changing from like here to here. I think what happens on our side, I think it's better for these politicians anyway because they actually have when they fulfill these duties, I think at least people are like more like satisfied with the politicians anyway, but also because then they're able to get the policies done with speed. I think speed is important because now you need to solve this the problem of urgency is extremely important because these are unstable democracies that need to have the problem solved or else the problem is going to worsen. And I already talk about how it happens on their side. So what happens is that politicians on our side are able to like stick to something and then they have those policies like fulfilled more quickly. I think that creates more change for everyone in the society and everything is being able to happen more quickly. I think people are more satisfied as well because these like politicians that voted in, at least they're sticking to what the people wanted, right? I don't think that people yeah. So what I think that politicians on our side would be better off and fulfill their duties better, and that's why I think side governments win. Thank you.
Here. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Let's have the next speaker dialogue. Here.
Break the very foundations of the democracy, a system that is said to represent the views and the goals of the general public. When people elected a democracy or they reformed from a previously like whatever regime was, whether it was a monarchy or an autocratic state, when you're a nascent, unstable democracy, a relatively new to the democratic scene, we tell you when your views aren't represented because an elected official has things like a change in political ideologies, when these are individuals that feel like they are inadequate in like fighting for change or fighting for the rights of individuals. These are the people that are less aren't in the best position to help the people on the ground, the people that are the most vulnerable and need to be protected. We tell there was no engagement from the case that came out from my first speaker when he characterized you that these are individuals that are in dire circumstances, that individuals don't just give up power for no apparent reason. They have legitimate reasons and the reasonings were never engaged with from my first speaker. Before I move on to my arguments, I have a few rebuttals. The first speaker told us how the economy is likely going to be affected, how this is problematic, the point in which you don't introduce like the anti-party hopping laws. We tell you that they told you that investors will have a bad perception towards your country or your governmental system and this will lead to less like investments in the first place. We tell this is firstly not true because as a nascent unstable democracy, you're not the top priority list for companies and other like individuals with power to want to invest in the first place. They want to wait for you to be a more stable democracy where it's not constantly fluctuating, when your economy is actually stable. We tell there aren't individuals lining up to invest in you in the first place. And secondly, the economy is inherently unstable to begin with anyway. Noticing that you're a nascent democracy, you probably reform from an autocratic state or a military controlled state, there's likely going to be lots of high tensions within the country in the first place. The economy isn't the main stakeholder or isn't the most important thing the government should be prioritizing. It is the faith and the trust that you instill in the individuals in the governmental system to begin with in order to fight for the best interests of these people. We tell you that the policies that are made are better, the policies that are made are only important if they cater to these individuals. We don't think the economy is something that needs to be prioritized now. And on their second speaker, on how they told you that voting for a politician doesn't equate to the party. As much as we acknowledge that Tun Mahathir, for example, was the forerunner or the face of the Pakatan Harapan Party, people also noticed that this is Tun Mahathir isn't the only individual within this party. The individuals within it also represent the same ideologies. The propaganda made was not just Tun Mahathir's ideologies, it was ideologies collectively of the party as a whole. That is why when we challenge their characterization, when they told you how you lose faith and you feel betrayed, a point in which some elected official steps out, we tell this is an unlikely characterization because we've already mechanized and told you why it's unlikely to do so. We already told you how we'll ban the forming of backlog coalitions because it's not pro-democracy, for example. And secondly, we also told you how you elect a newer official or someone within the party to step up into that position of power. So you still have that democratic system. You still have an individual that represents your ideologies. You still have a pool of individuals to pick from. These are individuals from the same political group that you're from. Some people that represent the values of the people on the ground. Now moving on to my first argument on how you enrage or the question on how or whether individuals on the ground feel betrayed or they're enraged by individuals or elected officials opting out of their coalitions or previous parties. We tell you on side of opposition, it is far better when you have an individual that wants to represent your ideals, when wants to help the people on the ground. This is a person that should be in a position of power in order to help you. When you lock these individuals into these positions of power they do not want to be in, regardless of the circumstance or the reasoning, we tell you these are instances in which you do not favor the public, or the public does not get the best form of policies made. Why is this so? We tell the two, why are they likely not going to be able to get the policies in the first place? We tell you there are two outcomes. A more extreme outcome is firstly, these are individuals that will do anything to get out of this position of power. They do not want to be associated with the current party they're in. They have a complete shift in ideologies. They are likely going to make policies that never reflected the propaganda. So if you previously voted for a government that was pro-immigration, and it's an individual that now does not believe in the same ideologies in the first place, they're actually going to enact policies that they personally believe in or they subscribe to now. So they're going to have policies that don't go directly against what you voted for, which is problematic because the public voted for a party that will represent their views and ideologies. And secondly, that these are individuals, or the second scenario, or the second outcome, is that they are going to stay in power. Or if this is an individual that truly is the best form of representation for the government in the first place, we tell you to tarnish their reputation when you allow them to stay within these kinds of, when you allow them or you disallow them from opting out of these kinds of parties. When my first speaker already told you things like corruption within a government, when you try to opt out of it, you lock these individuals in those kinds of structures. If this is truly a prime minister or a political party or individual within or a politician that is altruistic, that has the best intentions of the people at heart, you lock them into these, or you associate these individuals with the very same corrupt party. You never allow them to disassociate with themselves. They're never able to call out the very same structures. When they told you can still do these kinds of things, you can still call out the party you're very in, we tell you it's unlikely to do so. You're restricted, you're not allowed to do this. Any party, other individuals within your party disallow you from doing so. We tell you you're better able to call out a government, or these are individuals that are within the government in the first place. The point in which they're opt out, they're better able to call out these kinds of things. They're able to run for the next election and not have their reputation tarnished. What do you do to these kinds of politicians? These individuals that you say will best represent these individuals. The reason why you want to lock them in power in the first place. We tell you the second election, these are individuals that are likely going to be able to form a new party, for example, or have better representation, and you do not tarnish their reputation. Because the reputation you have in the political sphere is one that's extremely important, and one that is a major factor in how the political sphere works. When it exists in the paradigm of mudslinging and digging up the latest scandals, for example, we tell you when you allow these kinds of politicians to disassociate themselves from these kinds of corrupt coalitions that were formed in the first place, that have changed or aren't the same as they were on day one, we tell you allow these individuals to have an avenue to be re-elected to represent the views of the people. We tell the views of the people are the most important in the first place. You're likely going to enrage them, they're going to feel betrayed. The point in which they feel like their propaganda isn't fulfilled. The things that they voted for, the very person that they wanted, isn't able to enact the changes that they wanted. This is a world in which the people are disempowered and disenfranchised. Very proud of course.
Thank you, Diallo. Let's have the next speaker, Dr. Here.
kitchen table with my family, and them starting to be so anxious about what the future of our country was gonna be. I never seen my parents been that anxious before. They didn't know what they were gonna do with themselves. They didn't know whether the economy was gonna rise or fall, what we could do, how this was gonna affect us, how this was gonna affect trade in our country. We didn't even know if we had a government that we could trust. And that will lead me to my first argument. So why the on-side opposition, they've been stating a lot about the politicians, why this is important to the politicians, why the politicians' ideology is important, but they barely touch on how this affects the citizens. So it's first we want to justify that politicians owe a moral obligation to their citizens because they voted for them to be in this position of power. They need to know that this is the responsibility that they're putting themselves in. They need to be responsible for the power that was handed over to them and the responsibility they hold to their citizens that voted in power. And then their oppositions also join in this argument that the politicians, they feel like they don't have a voice, that they're locked in their echo chambers, that they're unable to voice out their true beliefs. But truth is, before you run for an election, before you take a big step, because you don't just like, hey, you wake up one day, you know what, I think I should become a politician. I don't think that's how it works. I think how it works is that you decide, yes, I'm willing to take this responsibility, I'm willing to carry out this change, and in an unstable democracy, in a new democracy, you acknowledge the amount of work you have to put in, you acknowledge the amount of time you have to put in, you acknowledge the risks and the changes that will occur, and you be susceptible to it because you want to do what's best for the country.
On that point.
And next, no thanks. And then next, they consented to being in power. They ran an election. They should understand that if they are elected, they are supposed to carry this sense of responsibility. And then they had points stating that locking them in the echo chambers, that they don't have the rights to share their political views. That in an unstable democracy, is this really what matters? You need to at least have a stable and working government. You have to gain the citizens' trust in, because if this is not achieved, the democracy worsens, because you need to have unity among your citizens. You need your citizens to be calm. You need to tell them, hey, we still got you. We are still in power. We're gonna still stick to it. No, thank you. So next, citizens are less likely to vote in the next election. This is a point that's brought up by the opposition, and I'm gonna tell you why this is not true. Because they said they'll develop a sense of hate towards the politicians for not sticking to their views. So like they said something like, okay, I joined this party and I said that I support immigrants. Now I don't support immigrants, but I'm still in a party that supports immigrants, but I'm gonna run policies that say that I do not support immigrants. And then they said that they will develop a sense of hatred towards these politicians. But truth is, the betrayal that they will feel towards your politicians if they decide to change parties will be worse than the betrayal that they feel towards the politicians for enacting policies that don't agree to their beliefs in their own political system. Because in the end of the day, when you decide to change parties, when you decide like, you know what, even though this democracy is unstable, no one really knows what's going on, I'm just gonna like switch parties, you know? It shows that the politicians prioritize their own beliefs and power above what is better for the nation. Because in an unstable democracy, you have zero government, you have a bad economy, no one knows where to go to, and you have problems that need to urgently be solved. And citizens will less likely to vote in the next election in their world, because they're not solving the problems that need to be solved right now. They're solving what they think is important to them, but it's not important to the country. It shows that the politicians care more about their own ideology over what's better for the citizens. And this overall is not better for the country because they're unwilling to sacrifice their own views for the betterment of the country, and already stated why they already consented to be willing to do this, because they acknowledge that they're coming into a new democracy. Next, thank you. And then they stated why is distrust in the government bad? We keep talking on our side, we keep bringing this up. So I would like to further emphasize distrust in the government is bad, especially in a new government, because the people, if you can't trust the people who are in power, people will question like, what's the point of voting, you know? The whole point of this democracy is to have people who will take responsibility over this country. We need people who will take action despite it all, you know? And people then question like, what's the point of voting? So then it's more likely for them in the next election to not vote and to not want to have a say, because like, anyways, they're not going to care about me. They're only going to care about their own beliefs over what I have to say. Okay, an unstable democracy will
Before
turn out.
that-
It needs people to work together. It needs to bring the economy together. It needs to increase trade. It needs to have a functioning education system. And why is this unlikely in your world when you're gonna have people just like, if I don't agree to this, I'm just gonna change. They can do that when in 5 years' time. They can do that when the democracy is more stable and do it after the re-election. Because people are going to be questioning whether the people in power even can. People are not willing to work together and vie for what's better for the entire country. And they are more likely to be more self-interested and do things for their own personal gain. So we're willing, here's the trade-off that our side is willing to make. We are willing to treat, first of all, we need to ask ourselves, in an unstable democracy, are politicians' beliefs really that important? In a democracy where your economy is failing, where your citizens don't really know what's in power, everyone's afraid, is this really what matters right now? No, in an unstable democracy, you need to have a functioning government. You need to have people in power who will answer the questions to make the citizens feel safe. Because if the citizens don't feel safe, then this united country, no one's willing to work together to bring this thing together. And people, honestly, you think about it, in an unstable democracy, in an unstable democracy, if you think about it, people in the rural communities, do they honestly care about politics at this point? Do they honestly care? Do they honestly care about the people in power? All they want right now is they want to feel safe. They want to have a sense of stability. They want to know that they still can live in this country and that this country is still functioning. And with that, I rest my case.
Alright, thank you, Gafrit. Let's have the last substantive speech. Outwit. Here, here.
A stable and functional government completely relies on candidates and individuals that are actually capable and actually believe in the manifesto that they're fighting for. This means when they actually believe in in their core beliefs or what their party stands for, we tell you that means a higher likelihood of them actually delivering on their promise which they made during the elections, right? And that's what side opposition stands for. Before I continue into the clashes, a few characterizations that I'd like to clarify and further emphasize, right? We tell you in the circumstance when a candidate that has been successfully elected into power, we tell you the instance of them actually wanting to opt out is two. First, they feel inadequate in governing the state of the country. They feel that they aren't able to be the face of the party and that they don't have the ability or aren't competent enough to actually fulfill the role, right? But second, we tell you that it also could mean a switch of ideology in the term or during the phase of them being in power, right? We tell you that this means they no longer believe in the same beliefs that they were running in their manifesto when they were actually campaigning, right? And we tell you this ultimately goes against the core beliefs of democracy, right? But understand when it's a nascent or unstable democracy, that this likely means the people have newly transitioned from an autocratic government or from a government that was based on military power or very cruel circumstances, right? We tell you in these situations, the people feel vulnerable. They feel scared. They really don't have much trust in the government because of their previous experiences, right? And we tell you in this circumstance, it's most important and it's extremely important that you as a government fulfill on your role on what your people voted for you, right? We tell you that the democratic mechanism of an election is important in the sense that when an official changes ideology or when they don't feel confident in actually fulfilling their role, we tell you this means that they're a completely different individual than when you voted for, right? Because acknowledge that one, you don't necessarily vote for a party just because of an individual. No, thank you. But secondly, even if in the case where I voted for Pakatan Harapan specifically because of Dr. Mahathir, the fact that he's in the instance where he switched ideology means that he's no longer the same person with the same beliefs that I voted for. Therefore, whatever deliberation or whatever decision that you made following up to voting for that individual is now invalid, and therefore it's justified that you switch it into someone that's more capable and actually believes in what the party stands for, right? Moving on to the three clashes of this debate. First, the mechanism of democracy. Second, the practicality and how this impacts the civilians. And third, trust, right? On site government, we see that they try to tell you that when you vote for a politician and you believe what the politician represents, therefore it's justified that even if the politician switches ideology or feels that they're not capable, they say that it's still justified, that they're still in power, right? But we tell you that goes against the fundamental principle of democracy, because when you lock them up in the same position, even when their beliefs change, even when they no longer want to fight for the cause that the people voted them for, we tell you that this means they're not likely to deliver on their promises that they made prior to during the election, right? We tell you this official isn't going to fully represent what the people voted them on for, right? We tell you that this means they're not likely to lobby for actual bills or fight for actual representation in which their supporters voted them in the first place, right? Directly compare that to on opposition side, where we already told you that we would have a democratic vote to choose another candidate that still stems from the same party. Understand this means that the same beliefs is still going to occur. The difference is the individual that is going to stay in power, or the newly elected representative, is going to actually believe in what the party fights for, and therefore it's justified that what this person represents is the same thing as what the civilians voted them for during the election, right? Because we tell you that if an official or if a candidate that has already been in power decides to wants to opt out because they simply change their ideology, or because they simply feel incompetent, we tell you in the case on site government, where you continue to force them into this power, where you continue to lock them up in an echo chamber, and you prevent them from dissociating themselves with parties or beliefs which they don't necessarily agree with or consent to. We tell you this means that they're not going to put in the full effort to actually realize what the citizens want them to represent, right? And we tell you that on democracy, side opposition wins this clash. Second, we talk about practicality. We already explained for my first two speakers that for actual change to occur, for actual impacts to actually have an outcome, you need individuals who actually believe in what they're fighting for. You need individuals who are genuinely and have an incentive to continue to voice it out, or voice it out during parliaments, or voice it out during discussions or during meetings, right? We tell you these are the individuals that side government that's only mutually exclusive to side opposition, because in side government you continue to force people who aren't interested in the same beliefs as maybe a left-wing party, but you continue to force them to speak on behalf of the party. So this means that whatever they're trying to convey, whatever they're representing, isn't actually what the people who voted them for actually wants. And we tell you this practicality, the practicality of this argument is that there's no actual change, or even if there's actual change, the change isn't going to be what the citizens wanted, right? But lastly, on trust, right? Side government wants to talk about how investors and they prioritize investors, but we tell you this is contradictory to what they say when they want to prioritize politicians or citizens. But on side opposition, we tell you that people are more likely to trust the democratic system because the system is there to prevent individuals who don't believe in the party, but to prevent individuals who don't believe in the party to continue to stay in power, right? We tell you this means that the citizens are sure that even if the individual which I elected changes their ideology, at the end of the day, there's going to be a new representative that is going to fully understand and convey what my struggles are in life. And we tell you that's the work side opposition wishes to propose. Never be proud to oppose.
Thank you, Op Whip. Let's have the Op reply. Here.
8:50 p.m. is the announcement.
if side of government is willing to concede that these are individuals that are probably individually incentivized. These are politicians that want to cater to their own needs, and that is the very reason we should keep them in this position of power, not allow them to opt out. We don't understand the democratic system or any form of change that they wanted to achieve on the side of government. When they told you that trust is the main metric of this debate, when their whole case is premised upon the idea or the tangency of trust of the citizens to the government, we tell you do not have the trust factor if this is an individual that won't represent you, an individual that wants to opt out, but you keep them shackled to this system. This is an individual that does not want to prioritize your needs, has a change of ideology, does not align with you, is not principally aligned with you. We don't understand why it's the best individual to now stay in power. We tell you on side of opposition, we've already provided you a far better alternative. When you allow these people to leave, some people that never want or previously wanted to but now do not have an incentive or do not want to represent you, do not have your best interests at heart, these are the individuals that shouldn't be in position of power. These are the people that they shackle on the side of government. This is when you have that sort of loss of trust in the governmental system. When you voted for a party or you voted for an individual into power, you voted for the outcomes that they promised you. When they don't deliver on these outcomes because they want to opt out of the party as a whole, when they have a conflicting interest of political ideologies, when they aren't able to cater to your needs, that is when the trust factor comes in. That is when trust is lost within the democratic system. This is when things like individuals not voting for the next elections, you reforming back your autocratic state, something that individuals do not want to, because the very reason you're a nascent democracy in the first place, because you reform from your previous forms of like voting or your political system. These are things that they do not want to, and you allow these individuals to stay voiceless. Because if the government doesn't represent me, and the previous government doesn't do so, this is when you have the tangible outcomes that my third speaker has already told you. When the things like your outbreaks and your riots, when the military comes into play, when they form back into these kinds of autocratic states, these are the things that happen when which has public outrage, when there's public outcry. We tell you there were no logical links to tell you why an elected official leaving a position of power equates to people losing trust altogether in the democratic system. We've already told you logical links of analysis as to why this is not so. Because as much as people voted for an individual that they thought represented their ideals, they voted based mainly on the basis of the promises that this individual made to them. So we tell you on the side of opposition, as long as these promises or the propagandas are fulfilled, that the trust within these individuals isn't lost. We've already told you why this is likely going to happen, where we have or we elect other individuals within the party to step up to fill this vacant position of power. When they told you that they're going to have a power vacuum or a power gap, we tell you this is something that's unlikely to happen. There's someone that is like you're going to elect someone as soon as possible, or even if there's a vacant seat, we tell you that there is a process in which you can fill that seat fast. And we tell you this is a better outcome or an alternative provided from side of opposition. And we tell you that one term is way too long for you to wait for this individual to leave a party. This is 5 years of policy making or 5 years of representing people on the ground that you never wanted, that you never cared about, or you are self-interested and never represented to its fullest. When you're an individual that isn't principally aligned with the people on the ground. We tell you 5 years or potentially even longer is an extended period of time some opposition is not willing to let by to allow these individuals to stay oppressed. And we've already told you why the ability for these politicians to opt out is one that's extremely important in order for you to firstly have better representation, because these are individuals that are likely to step up into positions of power and want to represent the country, want the best for the people, and secondly how these are individuals that can disassociate themselves from the bad name or the current government that's corrupt, for example. Very proud to propose.
Thank you. I'll reply. Let's have the gun reply.
The main thing that side opposition tried to push to today is how that these people change their ideologies along the way, and that is the reason as to why they want to switch parties for them to represent them, and how that in these vacancies that like they will elect new individuals from the same party. Let me explain why this is just not going to happen as efficiently as they make it seem. So first of all, I already explained to like multiple times why like like the process of electing and the transitioning of people to different positions is gonna first be very time consuming, and B, even if they decide to speed up the process in some ways, right? I think rushing this, especially in a time where this democracy is unstable, I think that the harm that gets created here is that people's views aren't actually it's not represented as well as if you had the person remain in that position of power. Because I think when you rush elections and things like that, I think people aren't able to grasp what they're truly signing up for. And that's a problem because that's reduces democracy even more. So I think that is why the whole system of how you want to elect a new individual from the same party in this very short period of time isn't going to work the way that they make it seem to be. So another thing to talk about how it's they just don't adopt the same ideologies anymore as when you first go to that aim. But I think that what is in the best interest of these people is to of the general people, is to have these politicians focus on completing their term, because that's what those people sign up for in the first place. I think that even if those politicians switch to another party, I think they can't fulfill the promises that they deliver to these people anyway, because I think because of the time that it takes for them to be able to go into that position and for them to actually to carry out on that promise in a completely new environment, completely new people that they are working with to fulfill something else. I think that politicians' ideology that they promise to the people, there's no guarantee from side opposition that guarantee can be fulfilled when they switch parties. I think that's something that side opposition has not delivered sufficiently as to why simply switching a party is suddenly going to be a guarantee of how these politicians can actually fulfill what they have promised. So let's say that these people they say that these people will lose trust if the politicians can't deliver, right? I think it's we're explaining to you how they most likely won't be able to deliver anyway, but the harm is greater when you have these people suddenly switch parties in the first place, because I think that shows that these people are neglecting their duties in the first place, because people don't exactly see that they want to carry out their business in another party, because they recognize that this is not possible, and that is the reason why they're separate parties in the first place. But even if so, I think these people just simply don't recognize this as a politician wanting to carry out the same belief just under a different party. I think what they see more as this politician just neglecting what they were supposed to give to these people, and that is why the people lose more trust on their side anyway. So we'll tell you that on our side, A, the politicians are they actually fulfill what they need to the citizens, which makes everyone more satisfied in the first place, and B, these politicians, they're actually able to create the change, and they're not able to do this when they switch parties, because it just for all the reasons mentioned above, how it's just going to take too long, which I think is a problem when the democracy is currently already very unstable, and this urgent problem needs to be solved now. So let's just say we take opposition at their best, where politicians' belief is fulfilled and they're able to change sides freely. But I think even as worse, but at least when these politicians are forced to continue, I think that these people are more content with what's happening anyway, rather than having the person they vote for change sides. I think that's where they lose more trust in the person in the first place, and I think it will create in the future create more skepticism of whether these people are able to deliver. I think that is why that side government brings on both in the interest of the politician and the general public, which is how we decide the winner of the debate. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Gaf.